know, generally, I mean, I've talked to Eric about it. We can get Eric up here now. That's what we intend to do is after third reading, break, come back at like 3 and do second reading. That way you'd have we're probably going to we don't decide that until after the 3 o'clock. So. House will be in order. All those not having privileges to the floor will please vacate the chamber. Members and guests will please rise as we are led in prayer today by the gentleman from the 13th, Doggett Ely.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If the members and guests will please join me in prayer. Dear God, we thank you for all the blessings you've provided us, including the blessing of the great challenges that lie before us. Please give us wisdom and courage as we make the decisions that are the best for the people of our state. Help us to keep you in mind with everything that we do. Help us to be more concerned with our character than our reputation, because our character is what you think of us. Help us to make everything we do pleasing to you, and bless every person within our state based on the decisions that we've made. In your name we pray. Amen.
Members and guests will please remain standing as we're led in the Pledge of Allegiance by the lady from the 48th, Delegate Waxman.
Members, please join me as we pledge our allegiance to our flag and this great nation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Reading of the Journal.
Journal of the House of Delegates, Charleston, Wednesday, May 25th, 2016.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from the 48th, Delegate Hamrick.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the further reading of the journal be dispensed with and that it be approved as having been read.
Gentleman from the 48th asks unanimous consent that further reading of the journal be dispensed with and it be approved as having been read. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Journal will be approved as having been read. Introduction of guests. Reports of standing committees. Reports of select committees. Messages from the executive. Messages from the Senate. Resolutions. Petitions. Motions. Bills introduced. Unfinished business. Bills on third reading.
Senate Bill 1002, supplemental appropriation to general revenue.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from the 35th, Doggett Nelson, to explain the bill.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are back to hopefully our final supplemental to close out our current fiscal year 2016. We've had a number this year. The committee substitute for Senate Bill 1002 will expire $63,781,000 and change into unappropriated general revenue. We currently have an estimated final gap of $111 million. I'll go through the 63 in just a second, but in addition to the 63, there's also in this bill $45 million that is subject to an executive order from the governor that would move money from Medicaid into the general revenue to fill our gap for 2016. The $63 million is made up. The big line item is $32 million from the rainy day fund. In the committee, we made an amendment. Originally, this bill had $12.5 million coming from the joint account called traffic, which is the tax reduction and federal funding increased compliance account. That was going to be its complete balance. What the committee in finance did, we amended that to only take $3 million of that. The other $9 million you'll hear later with the budget is being used in fiscal year 2017. A second $3 million is $3 million from the governor's contingency fund, an account that has $23 million in it of reappropriated dollars. Another $3 million, so this is 3, 6, up to 9, is coming from the tax refund account, an account that has $8 million in it now. So this $3 million will take that down to $5 million. That is an account that has been used over the years when cash has been short to basically make sure that tax refunds are paid. Most of the involvement with that account is generally in the months of January, February, and March. We passed that account was not hit. So this amendment is expiring $3 of the $8 million. The final $3 million is from rainy day. So the original bill was $29 million. We took it to $32. Quickly, there's $8.5 million coming out of the Attorney General's Consumer Protection Fund. It's taking that balance down to, I believe, just under $1 million. The Department of Revenue, the Insurance Commission, expiring $5 million. Department of Revenue, Lottery Commission, Operating Expenses Fund is expiring $4.6 million. And then the final $2 million to get to that $63 million is coming from the Public Service Corp. I will, as far as the $45 million being subject to the executive order, 2 accounts would be expiring reappropriated dollars. $15 million in the behavioral health, $15 million in an institutional account, $8 million from a social services account, and then $8 million from Medicaid. Mr. Speaker, I urge passage.
To the members, this bill was advanced to third with the general right to amend. Are there amendments?
The Committee on Finance moves to amend the bill. This is H. Fin. AM number 1.
The gentleman from 35th asked unanimous consent to explain the amendment, although I believe what the gentleman may have explained is this amendment. Is that correct? Gentleman's explanation was of the committee strike and insert amendment. Are there other members desiring to speak to the committee strike and insert amendment? The gentleman from the 17th, Delegate Rohrbach.
Gentleman yield for a question.
Gentleman yield. Gentleman yields.
You said there's going to be a change in the Medicaid program. Could you explain that a little bit more?
Change in the Medicaid program.
Or did I hear that right? You're taking funds out of Medicaid and putting them into the general fund?
Yeah, these are just a couple of funds in DHHR without an effect on Medicaid. These funds
okay.
do not have any association with matching.
But they are Medicaid funds.
They're medical service funds within DHHR.
For what services?
Social services and what?
Okay.
No. This is $8 million. What's that sheet that you have there? Just regular medical services.
Okay, so that is going to be an impact on whom? I mean, I guess what I'm driving at is this going to cut reimbursement to our providers or our nursing homes or our hospitals?
No, it's basically taking some money out of some excess funds that the Secretary has to be utilized now. And at the end of the day, what we heard was that typically the Secretary is paying providers on roughly a 22-day basis.
Yeah.
Because of our cash flow crunch, if you will, providers are now getting paid 28 days and longer. This will help hopefully shorten that payday.
Okay, but we're not talking reimbursement cuts or anything.
No, none of that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Lady from 43rd, Delegate Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the distinguished chairman yield for question?
Gentleman yields.
Just clarification, because I know myself when I hear the word Medicaid, and we all have heard of the struggles that we've had with the waiting list for Medicaid waiver and the cuts in those services. What we're doing here, I know we're talked about the providers, that this will help where they're not waiting 28 days. But I want to look at it on the point of what about the individuals that receive services? Is this going to have any effect on services that are being provided to individuals that are covered under Medicaid under special services?
We have been told nothing to that effect.
Okay. And I know whenever we talk about social services, is that just an overall title, or is that, because we've actually talked in this body also talking about social services positions where they are short finding social workers and things like that. Is this an account of monies that is set aside if you could ever find those individuals to fill in those positions?
We were told that this has no effect on any employment positions whatsoever.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from 63rd, Doug Folk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Gentlemen, continue to yield.
Gentleman yield. Gentleman yields.
Does this take any monies from the Senate reappropriated dollars that are around $29 million?
No, as you'll hear later with the presentation on the budget, that is addressed in our budget.
So it
going
doesn't
forward.
take any from the Senate money, correct?
This does not. This particular
thank you.
supplemental. No, it doesn't.
Further members desiring to speak on the adoption of the committee striking the third amendment. If not, the question for the House is the adoption of the committee amendment. Are there amendments to the amendment? If not, the question for the House is the adoption of the committee amendment. All those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Declare the amendment adopted. Are there further amendments? If not, the bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading. Clerk, please read the bill a third time.
Senate Bill 1002.
Question for the House is the passage of the bill. Gentlemen from the 35th wish to make any further comments as to the passage of the bill. Are there other members desiring to speak to the passage of the bill? The lady from 51st, Doug French.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As far as the $45 million from DHHR, if the Finance Chair would yield, please, is that
Gentleman yields.
$15 million for institutions that reappropriated money would fund instead, and $15 million behavioral health that reappropriated money would fund, $8 million social services, $7 million Medicaid, to be supplemented in 2017. Is that how it breaks down?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Further members desiring to speak to the passage of the bill. Not the question for the House is the passage of the bill. Those in favor of passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has each member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, 94 ayes, 1 nay, 5 members absent not voting. Majority of members elected having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Clerk, please report the title.
Senate Bill 1002.
Are there amendments to the title?
Committee on Finance moves to amend the title.
Question for the House is the adoption of the title amendment. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. Ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Declare the title amendment adopted. Chair recognizes the lady from the 16th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the bill take effect from its passage.
Lady from the 16th moves the bill be made effective from passage. All those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has each member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, 94 ayes, 1 nay, 5 members absent not voting. Two-thirds of the members elected having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill effective from passage. Clerk, please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Further bills on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 105, ending transfers to the Licensed Racetrack Modernization Fund, closing the Licensed Racetrack Modernization Fund and the Historic Resort Hotel Modernization Fund, and transferring remaining funds to the General Revenue Fund.
For purposes, gentleman from the 67th, seek recognition.
Point of order.
John may stay his point.
This bill was not on call. It is therefore outside of our jurisdiction to take it up. It fundamentally changes the relationship of the tracks, casinos, to the communities that authorize them. To the extent that you indicated that we should have a vote on this, I certainly ask for clarification of the procedure as to how to deal with this portion.
To the gentleman, the gentleman is correct in the, it is the practice and procedure of the House of Delegates that in situations in which a point of order is made in relation to whether a bill or an amendment is outside of the governor's call, that under the practice and procedures of our House dating back to 1932 and in relation to a 1958 instance, the practice of the House has been that the House does in fact vote as to whether to sustain the point of order. So if the gentleman is making a point of order that this is outside of the call of the House, the House would vote on whether to sustain that point of order in accordance with the practice and procedures of the House. Thank you. Is the gentleman making that point of order?
Oh, yes.
Okay. That's what just wanted to clarify. Make sure what we're voting on. Are there other members of the point of order and under the practice and procedures of the House? And I want to thank the clerk and the parliamentarian for their research into this issue. It is up to the House to make a vote on whether to sustain the point of order, and that is a debatable motion. Are there members wishing to speak to that motion? Lady from the 16th, Doggett Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On a point of clarification, if I want to allow this bill to be considered, I would then vote red.
The lady is correct. The question before the House is whether the point of order made by the gentleman from the 67th will be sustained. If the point of order is sustained, the House would not proceed to vote on the bill. If the point of order is not sustained, then the House will proceed to vote on the bill. So if you wish to have the bill voted on, the correct vote would be red. Are there further members desiring to speak on the point of order? The gentleman from the 20th, Doggett Markham.
Question for the chair.
Gentleman may proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, in regards to being outside of the call, that if the governor didn't put this on the call, what would be the procedure? I mean, if we pass this and we send it down to him, are we opening the House up to a lawsuit from the governor's office, or what's the process in that regard?
The gentleman, as I said, it's been the practice and procedure of the House to make this determination. Obviously, any determination as to the constitutionality of a bill would be within the realm of the court system, the judiciary branch. So that is certainly possible, but this has been the practice that the House has followed in the past when there has been a point of order as to whether a piece of legislation or an amendment to a piece of legislation has been offered during a special session under the governor's call.
Okay, at the appropriate time, I'd like to speak.
Gentleman may proceed.
I mean, a plain reading of the Constitution is this is outside the scope of our authority, not being on the governor's call. Therefore, I mean, we're in a budget crisis and we're going to end up in court if we take action on this. I would encourage a green vote on, I mean, if we're going to end up in court and cost the taxpayers of this state more money, why are we going to even risk and take that chance? That's crazy. So I would encourage that we sustain the motion.
Gentleman from the 22nd, Doggett Moffat.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too have a question. Do we still have 3 equal branches of government? The executive, legislative, and judicial? And
Yes.
as a legislative branch, we have a constitutional amendment duty to pass a budget, right? Is that correct?
The gentleman is correct.
Thank you. So by voting no on this, we can go ahead and pass our budget the way we see fit. Is that correct?
Gentleman is correct.
Thank you, sir.
The gentleman is correct in the sense that if you vote no, we will proceed to vote. If the House votes against this point of order, the House will proceed to consider passage of Committee Substitute for House Bill 105. Gentleman from the 23rd, Doggett Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question of the chair.
Gentleman may proceed.
Sir, this procedure's happened in the past, correct? And other?
Yes.
If I'm not mistaken, was that 2 times that it's happened before?
There are a number of cases that relate to this. In our research, there has been, the clerk and the parliamentarian has provided me a couple of examples, and I would say that there may be others. But in 1958, this was done, and it was placed before the House, and that has been the procedure that's been followed, and actually has been followed in my time here in the House.
All right. Thank you for helping me clarify that.
Further members, gentleman from 39th, Delegate Walters.
Inquiry of the chair, please.
Gentleman may stay his inquiry.
In 1994, I believe Superintendent of Schools of Kanawha County or state superintendent of schools sued then Finance Chair Earl Ray Tomlin regarding passing a bill outside the call. And I believe there was a ruling by the Supreme Court that the legislature had that prerogative.
To the gentleman, and I don't want to venture too far into arguing this issue, but I would say that there certainly are precedents that have been reviewed, and those precedents have indicated that bills have been permitted in terms of how the courts have related to the call itself. So that the determination of whether those bills were within the call was voted on by the legislature in the instances that I've mentioned. And of course, those are always subject to interpretation by our judiciary. Thank you. Gentleman from 38, Doggett Lane.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an important question that's been raised by the gentleman from the 67th point of order. I would note, however, that this issue has been decided numerous times in our history. Specifically, in 2005, I believe is the last time that this question was put before the House. In that case, there was a call that was limited to the food tax, and then Governor Manchin wanted to limit the reduction of the food tax to no more than 1%. A member of the state Senate filed an action in the Supreme Court, and there was a per curiam, what's known as a per curiam decision, which to those of you who aren't lawyers just essentially says the law is settled, we're not going to deal with this. But in that same case, there were concurring opinions filed by the justices, and many of the justices ran through the case law history of how these challenges, whether it's the Meraki case that the gentleman from the 39th referred to, or the other cases that have been referred to, have gone before the court. In my research, and maybe somebody could correct me, but I've found no case in which the bodies of the legislature have acted to vote and determine that the action was indeed within the call, and the court then struck down that action. Now again, I may be corrected on that. I'm certainly happy to hear if there are those cases. However, I would just point out some of the language from the opinions. Such a contention, and this is Justice Benjamin talking about the limitations of a call. Petitioner contends that specifying language from the governor's call is an unconstitutional action. Such a contention not only ignores concessions of the governor herein, it also implies that the legislature is in some way bound by the specific language of the governor's call in anything other than a general fashion. It is not. Our common law dispels this notion. It would take a truly tortured reading of West Virginia law to presume that specifying language within a call in any way binds the prerogative of the legislature to determine how it wishes to conduct its business. And so what we really have before us is a question of the no business other than language in Article 7, Section 7, which is the governor's authority to call a special session. The justice goes on to say that the court has been called upon to consider the no business clause several times. As far back as 1888, the court has emphasized the flexibility given to the legislature to broadly interpret the language within the governor's proclamation. I would point out to the members, in 1932, the governor's call was similar to the call that we received here, and that is that the legislature was called in to pass a balanced budget. In 1932, the legislature at that time made the determination that the best way to balance the budget, or part of the way to balance the budget, was to eliminate an executive agency. Well, obviously that was not on the governor's call, and the governor was not too pleased about that. And so there was a court challenge filed. In that case, the State Road Commission versus West Virginia Bridge Commission in 1932, The court reaffirmed the non-restrictive nature of the specific language used by the governor in a proclamation, finding that the abolishment of the Bridge Commission during an extraordinary session of the legislature was consistent with the language contained within the proclamation, which called for a balance to the state budget. And I'll quote from the case. "It is settled law that the contemplation or recommendation of a governor is regarded as advisory only, which the legislature may accept or reject at its discretion. In authorizing a governor to state the business of an extraordinary session and in limiting legislative action to that specific business, the Constitution does not confer one jot of legislative power." Not one jot. Now, why is that important? Because the broad subject of the call is to pass a balanced budget. The case law is clear. If it goes beyond, if a challenge goes beyond the walls here and the walls down the hall in the Senate, the case law is clear that we certainly have the authority to determine the way and the means of passing that balanced budget, whether that be by revenue measures, whether that be by cuts, whether that be by addressing the structural imbalance of the budget through legislation. The governor has not one jot of legislative power. His or her authority is only to set the broad subject matter that we are to discuss and debate and address during an extraordinary session. And so I would suggest to you that the gentleman's point of order should not be sustained, as it does not comport with at least 130 years of case law and interpretation of the Constitution of the state of West Virginia. It does not comport with, quite frankly, the position of then Speaker of the House, Bob Kiss, now Secretary of Revenue, Bob Kiss, in 2005 when he came down from the Speaker's dais and made an impassioned speech from his chair about how we must retain the control of whether or not a matter on the call is within the purview or the discretion of the legislature. It does not, the gentleman's point of order, if sustained, would not comport with the position of then Senate President in 2005, now Governor Earl Ray Tomblin, when he filed his briefs in that 2005 case and argued that that power is wholly within the legislative realm. And so I would suggest to you that there is a long and settled history about where the power lies in interpreting, where the authority lies in interpreting whether something is within the call that the governor has issued when we're called back into special session. This instance before us falls squarely, in my suggestion, within the purview, within the realm of the 1932 case that said that when the call says to pass a balanced budget, we have broad discretion as to how we achieve that goal. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Lady from the 51st, Douglas Fleshire.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a question for the gentleman from Jefferson.
Gentleman yield. Gentleman yields.
I know that you're a lawyer, and I'm guessing that you looked at several of these cases.
Yes.
And I don't recall any of the cases dealing with new legislation being brought up by the legislature. I understand there's language and dicta in those cases talking about what it means to say the legislature, when so convened, shall enter upon no business except that stated in the proclamation. Do you recall any cases where the legislature introduced its own bills?
Well, I'm not going to say never, but I do not believe so.
Well, I don't remember any in the 20 years that I've been here. And also, isn't it true that some of the justices that have commented on this are no longer on the court, like Justice Maynard?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Gentleman from 53rd, Douglas Smith.
Point of inquiry, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman may state his point.
I may be a little confused here. I'm not a lawyer, so it's hard for me to comprehend a lot of this stuff. The cigarette tax of 45 cents was on the governor's call list. The hit was one. So with that, and that was defeated here by this body. So this here, the ComSub for 105 is to recover some of that the money that would have been generated by the cigarette tax. Is that the way I'm understanding it? This is for next year's budget to recover some of the money that we didn't get from the cigarette tax?
Well, this would certainly, gentleman is correct that this funding would go into the 2017
And
budget.
for the budget, so, okay. I just want to make sure. Thank you.
Gentleman from 66, Doggett Espinosa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A point of inquiry.
Gentleman may stay his point.
As I understand the question before us, the question will be whether to sustain the gentleman's point of order. So if I intend to oppose sustaining his point of order, I would vote red on this measure. Is that correct?
The gentleman is correct.
Wish to speak to the question?
The gentleman may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While I intend to oppose the underlying legislation, and I plan to speak to that here after we conclude action on this, the gentleman's point of order, I am persuaded that it is within the purview of the legislature to take up this legislation. Therefore, I intend to vote not to sustain the gentleman's point of order. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The other members desiring to speak before I recognize the gentleman from 67 to close debate. Gentleman from 67.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What we didn't hear in the debate was what this bill is about. It's not just about closing a fund, closing an account, sweeping that account. It's about fundamentally changing the deal that this state made in 4 counties to bring slots, to bring table games into racetracks. And part of that deal in the partnership, where we have tax rates up to 50% of the gaming revenues, is to take away a portion of that money that's used by the tracks to make sure that their facilities are modernized and competitive.
To the gentleman, if I could, I don't mean to interrupt, but the question for the House is whether this is within the governor's call, and if in fact it is determined that it is, we proceed. We will be debating the merits of the bill. So I would ask that the gentleman keep his comments to whether this is within the governor's call.
And this is relevant to understand what the bill does, because the bill changes that fundamentally. When you look at the call doesn't say anything about racing. It doesn't say anything about gaming. It doesn't say anything about the deal with those counties and with those corporations who've come into West Virginia and invested hundreds of millions of dollars. The call has nothing to do with any of that. Yet we have a new bill that fundamentally changes the deal. My good friend from Kanawha spent a lot of time doing the legal analysis. He defined the term per curiam. What he forgot to say is per curiam says, don't follow this opinion. You can't cite it if you're a lawyer, right? We're not talking about, as the last important case the Supreme Court considered, was the difference between 1% or 2% in the food tax change. That was whether that was within the call. We're talking about, do we fundamentally change the deal with these 4 communities? Completely different. This is clearly outside of the call, and I urge you to vote green.
Question before the House is, shall the point of order be sustained? Those in favor of sustaining the point of order will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has each member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, 28 ayes, 65 nays, 7 members absent not voting. Less than the majority of members present having voted in the affirmative, I declare the point of order is not sustained. For the purpose of the gentleman from the 27th, seek recognition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My apologies. However, I did poke this button a few times, but it did not register. Record me in the negative, if you would, please.
The gentleman's vote will be recorded. The question now before the House is the passage of the bill. The gentleman from the 35th, Delegate Nelson, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What we have before us is a committee substitute for House Bill 105, dealing with the elimination of the racetrack, what's known as the Racetrack Modernization Fund. We've had quite a bit of discussion on this over the last 2 years, and I will once again give just a little bit of background. This particular fund was put in place in 2010 for a term of 10 years. What it did was set aside $10 million from lottery administration funds that would basically go back to our four casinos, 5 if you include the Greenbrier, that for any investment they had in new lottery video machines and other terminals, for every $2 invested, they'd receive $1 back. Over time, those funds have been used, and many new machines have been purchased. Originally, it was $10 million. A couple years ago, we amended that to $9 million. So what this bill does will eliminate that program effective July 1. That $9 million will then come in to our general revenue fund. The committee substitute directed those monies to come into our rainy day fund. It was structured that way in case there was an issue with this bill, and so it wouldn't negatively affect our budget. But this is $9 million more on an annual basis to fill our gap. There's also $5 million in unspent monies right now. This bill allows for any application between now and July 1 to basically capture those $5 million. To the extent that no applications are made between now and July 1, those $5 million would also come in for our budgeting purposes. So this is a total of $14 million on the high side coming in to fill our gap for 2017. Mr. Speaker, I urge passage.
Are there other members desiring to speak to the passage of the bill? The gentleman from the 36th Delegate Rowe.
Would the gentleman yield for some questions?
Gentleman yields.
As I understand it, the money we're dealing with is money that the lottery, that the 4 tracks have produced themselves to the budget. It's not a matter of pulling taxpayer money in for this fund. This fund is a part of the funds that they have been paying at a tax rate of maybe high tax rate, maybe 50%.
Well, in fact, this comes from the 4% general administrative fee that lottery charges for all of our casino and gambling operations that goes into a separate fund. And from that fund, these monies have come from since 2010.
So this is not like a tax increase on one industry with 4 facilities, 5 facilities?
No.
Is there any thought about reducing the amount that the state takes from those facilities to allow them themselves to improve and make investments in upgrades to their facilities?
There was all kinds of discussion, and it's the desire of this body, but I guess we didn't hear anything in committee nor on the floor here in the way of an amendment.
Do you know if do you know the amount of revenue that's generated by these 4 facilities, the 4 tracks?
It's hundreds of millions of dollars.
Would it be possible maybe that one facility has several $100 million in revenues to the state?
Absolutely.
And our budget deficit we're trying to fill is $270 million?
At this time.
And the facilities provide, you said, you don't know how many millions of dollars the 4 tracks produce in income to the state?
Hundreds of millions.
But the amount that you're dealing with is only 4% of that amount of revenue, or
No.
is that the way that's calculated?
No.
And then finally, is there anything in this, in the bill that would separate the track facilities from the gambling facilities? That's not in...
All 5 gaming facilities are treated exactly alike with this piece of legislation.
Right, but there's nothing, there were bills in the session that would have the tracks separated and eliminate the requirement that the gambling facilities have tracks associated with them. That's not in this.
No, we're not getting into racing and decoupling and purse funds and things like that. This is just modernization tax credit.
And you said that the money's dedicated to the rainy day fund. Is that correct?
That's the way the committee substitute.
And is the concept that if they do want modernization funds, that they can then approach the state and get those funds? Or is this shut that down forever?
This shuts everything down as of July 1, 2016.
So if they face stiff competition from other states, then they'll just have to meet that out of the what do we leave them, maybe 50% of the revenues they produce.
To the extent this is one of their many tools to be competitive.
Thank you, sir.
Further members desiring to speak to the passage of the bill. Gentleman from 66, Delegate Asmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I certainly recognize, particularly as a member of the House Finance Committee, the challenge that we had before us, trying to close our $271 million budget gap. And certainly pleased to work with my colleagues, not only on the House Finance Committee, but other members in this chamber, identifying, I believe, approximately $145 million in cuts, approximately $35 million in special revenue account sweeps in order to help close that gap. I think if you look at the deliberations of the House Finance Committee, there were a number of cases where we looked at potential cuts to our budget, and after doing our due diligence, vetting those proposed cuts, we came to the conclusion that while initially they seemed like good ideas, in the final analysis, they really weren't or at least there wasn't sufficient vetting to conclude that they were good options in order to help close our gap. I believe that this particular cut does fall in a similar category to some of those other proposed cuts that fell by the wayside, and I described to my House colleagues, my House Finance colleagues, that I think this in many ways is penny wise and pound foolish. Those of us in the Eastern Panhandle are probably more aware than others of you around the state that the Hollywood Casino, which is the casino that generates the most video lottery and table gaming revenue, actually, my understanding, and I believe the Lottery Commission confirmed my understanding, Hollywood Casino at Charlestown generates more video lottery and table games revenue than the other three racetracks and the Greenbrier combined. So just to give you a little sense as to the magnitude of the operation there. But many of you may not be aware, as we are, that Charlestown is facing one of its greatest threats, competitive threats, here in the very near future, with the scheduled opening of a major casino in the National Harbor area down along the Potomac River near Washington, D.C., within close driving distance of Charlestown. It's a $1.3 billion MGM National Harbor Casino Resort that's scheduled to open later this year. And it's, despite the fact that the owners and operators of the Hollywood Casino have made hundreds of millions of dollars of capital investments in that facility in order to position itself to compete with these surrounding entities, it is anticipated that it is going to have a major impact, just due to the fact that currently, if you look at the demographics of the individuals who visit the Hollywood Casino at Charlestown, a significant number of those patrons do come from the area in close proximity to this proposed casino. Again, just by way of comparison, I think my friend from Kanawha had pointed out the amount of revenue that is generated by the various casinos. If you look at Hollywood Casino alone, they generate approximately $203 million annually in tax revenue for our state. Now, again, that's just one casino. That doesn't include the other three casinos or the Greenbrier. If you compare that, for example, to the oil and gas industry, they generate about $162 million in severance taxes. So again, I don't share that to suggest that we should not continue our diligent efforts to protect and promote the oil and gas industry here in West Virginia, but I share that to again underscore what really is at risk here as we face this additional competition. And for that reason, I just believe that it's really the absolute wrong time to take away a tool which again, as my colleague from Kanawha County rightly pointed out, monies that are generated by the casinos themselves. This is essentially a 4% administrative fee that was assessed on the casinos back when the lottery operations first commenced, which was an excess tax. Initially, the casinos were rebated back the excess 4% tax. That later evolved into the matching fund that you have here before us, where instead of simply being rebated, what was an excess tax that the Lottery Commission did not require in order to conduct its lottery operations, it evolved into this matching fund, and unfortunately, I think evolved into the perception that it's a subsidy, when again, those monies are generated by these casinos. So, Mr. Speaker, I plan to oppose this legislation. Again, while I certainly recognize the challenge before us, I do believe it's the wrong time to be putting a major industry which generates hundreds of millions of dollars for West Virginia, putting those operations, and the employees, roughly 1,600 employees at Charlestown alone. I'm informed that approximately 4,000 casino employees around the state. I think it's the wrong time to put those employees and those tax dollars at risk. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from the 10th, Doggett Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the finance chair yield?
Somebody else.
It's a sweet deal, isn't it? Has been a sweet deal. Do any other industries in the state have this kind of a deal where we give them back $1 for every $2 they spend?
There are various tax credits out there like this. I can't answer direct to you. So
up and down the Kanawha River, we've got a lot of industry. Do those industries get this kind of a deal?
This particular type of deal, no.
And do those people employ people in the state of West Virginia?
Yes.
They do. And if we would give industry this kind of a deal, how many more people do you suppose we would have employed in the state?
You're getting outside my pay grade now.
How about coal? Do they have it? Oil and gas? No other industry in the state of West Virginia has this kind of a sweet deal. And I agree it's a great deal. I agree that it's helped sustain these businesses. In Parkersburg, we've got a historic hotel. If they need new mattresses and they spend $10,000 to buy new mattresses, the state's not going to give them back $5,000 of those dollars. What's good for one is good for all, and if we can't do it for all the industries in the state, we don't need to do it for one. Mr. Speaker, I would ask for support of this measure. Thank you.
Gentleman from the 67th, Doggett Skinner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Deal? Really? I'd like for your hotel to please give 50% of what it takes in to the state of West Virginia. 50%. We've got a severance tax on cash, right? We bring people from out of state with cash into West Virginia, and we take 50% of it for the state. To be able to make a deal where we can get some of it back in partnership with the state to make more money, that's the deal that we have. We would gladly take the tax rate of any private hotel. Gladly. Let's go back to the session when we helped out our friends in coal, oil, and gas by reducing the by reducing the workers' comp, which we did, and to my friend from the 24th, I voted to do that. And the reason why I voted to do that was to try and get the same deal for the folks at the racetracks. And we had that opportunity then to give them the same deal. But no, we gave a break to gas, and as my friend from the 66 pointed out, severance into the state of West Virginia from natural gas last year, and to the gentleman from Ritchie, last year, $162 million. From Charlestown alone, the tax revenue to the state of West Virginia last year, $203 million. And that doesn't count this 4% extra fee. So here we have an industry that is under intense competition, a $1 billion casino about to come online about 50 miles down the river. You can look at what's happened since 2013. We're fighting it, and the revenues are going down because other people want to take this cash. And what are we going to do? One of the industries that's generating hundreds of millions of dollars for the state of West Virginia is under threat. Let's kick them while they're down. Let's kick them while they're down. I mean, I can't even conceive that we would have this kind of conversation about coal, oil, and gas. We're doing everything that we can to help them. Hundreds of millions of dollars. And why? We all know that we need to generate more money in the state of West Virginia for this budget. This money, it's dedicated to things like the promise. Seniors, it's all in the code. It's dedicated money to do that. And by taking away this money, which is invested in keeping us competitive, it's going to make it harder and harder to bring in that money. No other industry in the state of West Virginia pays a tax rate. And it is not a subsidy, Mr. Kapler. It is not a subsidy. It is a part of the partnership. Hoppy Kercheval, it is not a subsidy. 50%. Just give us the same deal and we'll be happy. How about that? Tax us the same as you do the highest other tax rate on any industry. We'll be happy with that. And you can call it a subsidy then and we'll give it all up. But why do this now at the most critical time in the future of this one industry? This will hurt us. This will hurt us in the long run. This isn't about this year, by the way. This isn't transferring funds from A to B for this year. This shuts it down forever. It turns it off. Make a decision to help an industry that's helping you, that's funding this state. The footprint of Charlestown is small. Its impact in every single county across the state is enormous. Let's not kill the golden goose. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from the second, Doggett Weldon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was going to talk about the subsidy issue, but I think that my friend from Eastern Panhandle kind of hammered that home for everybody in here, so might not need to bring that up. And I certainly applaud the finance chair and their committee and every piece of work that they put into the budget. And I understand that this is probably what they see potentially as a piece of low-hanging fruit, and I understand that. And while I don't live in a district where there's a track, I live right in between two of them. We've got Mountaineer in Hancock County, and we've got Wheeling Island in Ohio County, and I live in Brooke County, right in between. We've got a lot of people in my district that work at these two places. And good, bad, or indifferent, these two tracks have really come under pressure in recent years because of smoking bans that were put into place in these two counties. And they've been getting hammered. And the revenue loss and the employment losses that they've suffered have been difficult. And now they face a lot of competition because you've got a casino going into Mahoning in Ohio. We've got two within 30 minutes of both of them in the state of Pennsylvania. And at those locations, there's no restriction on smoking. And so individuals who, like I said, good, bad, or indifferent, like to smoke, they can go to either one of those places. And they don't have to worry about having to go out to a portico on the side of the building or a porch somewhere in the back, or not having to do it. And that's their choice, and they're free to decide that. But right now, when these two places are facing very difficult times because of these bans, I feel like that perhaps we're pulling the rug out from under them, and we're taking funding that was promised to them well before I ever got here. And now they're going to face these difficult times, and this bill is going to take more additional money from them, which is originally their money to begin with, and I think we've covered that. So while I certainly applaud the Finance Committee and their hard work that they've trying to scrounge for every dollar that we need, I'm not certain that what the benefit of this will be is worth what we're taking from it. So I can't support this piece of legislation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Lady from 51st, Doggett Fritsch.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I truthfully did not want to speak on this bill. However, we've heard about the high tax rate on the casinos, but I think it's important to understand that these casinos in West Virginia have been given a special privilege to exist and to be protected from other gambling other gambling competition that could occur in the state. So perhaps the truth really is that they have a much sweeter deal than just this modernization fund that was created in 2010. Thank you.
Lady from the 3rd, Doggett Storch.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I held my hand as long as I could. I want to bring up something that I think maybe people don't realize as far as this goes. When casino and table games, or when the table games went into the tracks, there was a new program that was started at West Virginia Northern Community College. They advertised it. They got a lot of students into this program. All the students that got into this program learned a new career, learned a new trade, learned something they could do that made a pretty decent amount of money for them. They were able to make a nice living. They were able to go to work at Wheeling Island Racetrack. They were able to partner together with the school and do this. Being a steel fabricator for 21 years, I like to look at root cause, because every time there's an accident that happens, there's a root cause that created that accident. And when I look at the decline that's happened to our gaming industry, I look at Wheeling, West Virginia Northern Community College not advertising their program that they had to train dealers anymore, and that's now resulted in a loss of faculty, that's resulted in a loss of staff at the college, that's resulted in a loss of students that maybe have gone someplace else to learn those skills, and also residents that left the Wheeling area and went to the track at the Meadowlands up in Pittsburgh, or in outside of Pittsburgh. We have, as long as I've lived in Wheeling, had a mall that exists in Belmont County, Ohio. We have no problem crossing into Ohio and do it multiple times every day. We have been trained to travel into Ohio because that's where our mall was. For a number of years, you couldn't buy underwear in Ohio County. You can now as a result of Cabela's, if that's your thing. But there were no opportunities for the 30-some years that I was in Wheeling to even buy your underwear. So we don't think twice when we go over to Ohio. And that's how people are that game. People that come in and stop at Wheeling Island, God bless them and thank them for doing so, because Wheeling Island Racetrack takes care of our island. Madison School partners with them, and those are some of our lowest income children in the county. They have the benefit of a business that helps them. So I remember being here when this started, and I really wish that I would have voted no on the Racetrack Modernization Fund now, because it turned into be a slap in their eye later. Thank you.
Gentleman from 63rd, Doggett Polk.
Gentleman, Finance Chair, yield. This fund, does the little mom and pop shop that has their little one-arm bandits push-button machines, are they eligible for dollars out of this for their modernization?
I don't believe so.
All right. The surrounding states that have came into the gambling business, are you familiar with what they're taking off the top of their industry?
Unfortunately, no.
Thank you. Will the gentleman from 67th yield?
Gentleman yield.
Sure. Same question. Are you familiar with the surrounding states tax, how they tax their gaming facilities?
I don't. I know generally the tax rates for gaming across the country vary from, in the 20s up to the 50s. I think we may have the highest tax rate in the entire country.
So you're not familiar with what it is in Maryland, which is one of our main
I don't know what Maryland is, but I think that we probably have the highest tax rate in the country.
All right, thank you.
Lady from 36, Doggett Guthrie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, it was a real privilege in this state, and a lot of people took a big gamble, pardon the pun, as we moved into this industry. A lot of people hated it. A lot of people were suspicious of it. But the tracks all agreed to a very high tax rate for the privilege of serving the gaming community. You know, if we had offered the tracks a piece of legislation that would allow them to take, or to be taxed less, so that they could cover this modernization fund, I'd have been all for this, closing this up. But as it stands, we really are looking at a taking. We're taking from an industry, because we can, money that's theirs. I mean, and I just don't see where there's any fundamental fairness. I mean, at this point in time, they are paying taxes in excess of what coal, oil, and gas pay in severance tax, whether you like it or not. And I have to agree with the gentleman from the 67th that, you know, we all stood here and we voted for hope when we voted for the to remove the coal, oil, and gas folks from their obligation to workers' compensation, even though they had created that problem to begin with. I voted for hope against my better judgment, and I stood here and said I wasn't going to. So I looked like a fool. But on this one, it's not an awful lot of money, but it's enough money that it matters to these businesses. And I just can't see why we would be taking such a little amount of money, closing a door on an industry, and saying, okay, in addition to the 50% tax bracket that you're forced to pay because of the deal that we all made with each other, you're going to have to come up with the money for modernization, even in a time of decline. It just doesn't seem very fundamentally fair. If we're going to do big tax breaks for some of our other large struggling industries, it doesn't seem that it's fair to do this to one that's bringing in so much money still, even though they're in decline. I know I haven't changed one vote, as the gentleman from Ritchie always says, but I think it's important to know that that our situational ethic meter sometimes just astonishes me. And what should be good for everyone should be good for all. And if we're going to vote for hope, let's vote for hope on this one too. I ask for you to vote against this bill.
Gentleman from the 14th, talk about.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On this issue, I'm not going to suggest how people should vote on it. I will say that there's one piece of information I think that we all need to realize when we're looking at whether you call this a subsidy or this their own money. I did a little quick Google search here, and it looks like Hollywood Casino, as the example that was brought up here, is owned by Penn National Gaming Incorporated. They have about 14 casinos listed here, located in Ohio, Maryland, Pennsylvania, among the states that are close to us. So in one sense, it seems like, in a way, this money is being used to modernize the casinos here in West Virginia, possibly, but it's actually, we're paying corporations in West Virginia to compete against the corporations in our neighboring states when they're all owned by the same people to some extent. So I think that's just a piece of information we all need to realize as we make a decision on this, because I see this as an important decision to many of us. But are we really subsidizing the industries that are located outside of West Virginia? Penn Incorporated in this example. Thank you.
John from the 7th Delegate, Ireland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I guess I'm a little bit confused here this morning with some of the positions that we seem to take. I appreciate the facts that the gentleman, the 14th, just brought out with respect to ownership and competing against oneself and how we subsidize that. I think it's a sad commentary for West Virginia for us to say that gambling generated more revenue than oil and gas. I don't dispute the facts, but I truly believe that is a sad commentary, that gambling, which really generates no overall wealth, contributed more taxes than a basic extraction industry like oil and gas. I think about the fact that we have spent considerable time in this chamber in the last few days standing, many of us, on our principles. We have made decisions based on our principles. And yet, when I think back about what the Kanawha Valley looked like a few years ago, and I know I'm going back in time, and the jobs that were here, and the jobs were up and down the Ohio Valley, the jobs that were in Wheeling, the jobs that were in Huntington, the jobs that were moving things on the rails. Did we subsidize any one of those industries as they went into decline? Any one of them? DuPont Bell up here, I think at one time had like 4,500 employees. Union Carbide across the river, which now no longer exists. The Ordnance plant. You can go around our state and look at what we were at one time: industrialized, manufacturing, a bakery in Princeton, a glass plant in Williamstown, a steel mill in Weirton, an aluminum plant in Ravenswood. Did we stand here and subsidize any one of those so they could be more competitive? Whether that work went to China or Japan or whether it went to Maryland, really, to me, is of little consequence. It went out of West Virginia. It disappeared. So as we stand on our principles, how is it that we can justify subsidizing one industry, if it's really an industry, and not doing that for all industries? I don't understand that, folks. I really don't understand that. Now, I don't come from an area that has a casino, and I recognize that those of you that do, it's important to you. But I come from an area that had an awful lot of manufacturing jobs, of which I participated in for a number of years. And I don't recall when the chemical company that I worked for went to a modernization plan and needed money, that they ever came down here and said, guys, I need $10 million a year to upgrade my instruments on whatever that needed to be done. So I would suggest, and I wanted to ask the chairman a few questions about where this money really was spent and how broadly the modernization of historical hotels, where was that money spent? Now, I like the Greenbrier. It's a beautiful place, if that's where the money was spent. And it's important to the people of Lewis County. It's important to people of West Virginia. But I'm not sure it's any more important than the Blennerhassett Hotel in Parkersburg or the Wells Inn in Sistersville. It's bigger, yeah. Got more golf courses associated with it. Also has a gentleman that has a fair amount of money behind it. So I'm not sure what we're trying to do here this morning. except do something that makes sense from a general standpoint. Now, I suggest that we need to vote green on this thing. We need to quit subsidizing particular entities unless we want to subsidize industry in general. Now, we can say, well, we do that through various taxes, whatever. It's kind of interesting also that we have had a lot of discussion about raising the tobacco tax 45 cents and think that's not a good idea, but it's a great idea to maintain an industry that pays 50% tax. I guess that makes sense. 50% tax, but yet we won't raise tobacco tax 45 cents. Again, that just doesn't quite compute in my mind. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would suggest that we vote green on this thing. Let's get on down the road. Let's get this thing done. Thank you.
John from the 50th Delegate, Mansion.
Would the esteemed Chair of Finance rise for a question?
Somebody else.
An interesting question has been raised by the delegate from the Eastern Panhandle, and that dealt with what is the effective rate of taxation on these types of facilities in our surrounding states. Can you tell me what they charge or how the deal is structured in Maryland or Ohio so that we could know whether or not we're treating this industry fairly?
Unfortunately, I can't right now. My homework was on this particular bill.
So I mean, did the Finance Committee ever address that issue about this bill as to, well, how does this compare to other states, or has that ever been looked at all?
It did not come up in this week's Finance Committee meetings, no.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Speaker, I think about this and I can't conceive of any other bill that this legislature has taken up where we've had such a significant and dramatic effect on a particular industry and not tried to evaluate how it affects them in relation to how our sister states are treating them. And it seems very unusual that we're taking that step here today. Thank you.
The gentleman from the 17th, Delegate Rohrbach.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to refer the members to their iPads. And if you look up National Council of State Legislatures, you can Google up what the rates are, and they have a very nice study that was compiled in 2015. And I'm just going to read those. I'm not going to draw any inferences. Maryland, 67% of gross casino revenues. New York State varies between 60 and 69 depending on your volume. Ohio, 33%. Pennsylvania, 55%. And according to this study, they list West Virginia at 35% of AGR. I assume that's gross revenue. So there it is. We've heard a lot of talk about the rates in the surrounding states, but at least according to the body that we are all members of, here is a factual report written by Jackson Brainard, dated 9/28/15 with the numbers that I just read out. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Lady from the 51st, Delegate Fleischauer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to be voting against this bill because I'm concerned that it could jeopardize the Promise Scholarship. I'm one of the people that was here and voted on the Promise the very first time, and that was a very difficult vote for me. I don't like gambling. I think it's very irritating to walk in casinos with all that ringing and buzzing, but there are a lot of adults that do like it, and they are doing something that adults are allowed to do. It is legal. And I remember the first time that I attended with Governor Wise a ceremony distributing notification that people got the Promise Scholarship. it was one of the most meaningful ceremonies I've ever went to. And it was, there were grandparents that were crying because it was the first time anyone in their family had ever gone to college. And that's what we were voting on then, is whether we should permit an expansion of gambling to pay for something that I think most people in West Virginia believe is very valid, those promised scholarships. And part of the money from this revenue source that is going into an industry that is not doing as well as it used to be goes to pay for promised scholarships. The industries that the gentleman from Ritchie cited have been in decline for a long time. And this industry came in here and provided substantial revenue for our state. I don't know that we want to kick them when they're down. And for those reasons, I'm going to be voting no.
Gentleman from 67, Tax Camp.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to clarify something. The gentleman from Cabell suggested that somehow we're at a 35% tax rate. I think that's the revenue, the total revenue. Our tax rates vary from anywhere from, and let me pull this up, anywhere from on gaming, they go anywhere from 35% up to well into the 50s. There's a different rate on table games, there's a different rate on slots, and there's a different rate on horses. And if that says that our rate is 35%, it is incorrect. There's plenty of other information we can share with you, but it is absolutely not true.
Lady from 43rd, Doug Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the distinguished chairman of finance answer a question?
Gentleman yields.
I know it has been brought up regarding the Promise Scholarship, seniors, and other programs. I would just like to know if this piece of legislation would pass, is the Promise Scholarship at risk or at risk for being decreased, and will there be risk to senior programs?
Absolutely not. And again, thank you for the question. As I mentioned earlier, the first money that comes out of gambling proceeds is a 4% administrative fee. It's too bad I didn't bring the bucket list. And we could straighten this out very quickly. This bill has may language in it. And this 4%, this $9 million, comes out of that. And this is before any of the other buckets get filled. And how this works is this administrative fee covers the operations of the lottery and all their functions. And this is some excess, these are excess dollars. And to the extent that our pool declines and the operation of the lottery consumes the 4%, these monies would not be there. But without a doubt, seniors, Promise scholarships are not touched in any way with this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from 3rd, Doug Fluharty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Chairman yield.
Gentleman yields.
Thank you. First off, thanks for all the long hours you spent in committee regarding the budget. I think you guys deserve a lot of credit for that, and all the members in Finance Committee. But during the long nights you've had, it has been insinuated on this floor that maybe some of this money in a modernization fund was being spent out of state. And those do you have any evidence that that was taking place?
I don't have any evidence. No.
So nobody came in and said, hey, this millions of dollars that's going back to the track, some of it's being spent out of state because a company may operate a track out of state. No evidence.
The statute specifically states that these monies must be spent in a West Virginia located facility.
So when it was insinuated earlier that maybe the money was flowing out of state, by statute we require that money to remain in the state, correct?
As it relates to these particular dollars, no.
Thank you. At the appropriate time, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman may proceed.
I think we're trying to twist in the wind here, but one of the basic premise when it comes to finances in our state is, are we getting a return on our investment? I think it's clear, based upon the investment that we've put forth in the tracks in the gambling community and the amount that they're being taxed. We could argue that night and day as to the exact amount, but we are getting a return on our investment. So why would we as a body vote to lessen that return, to turn around and say, you know what, let's not compete with other states? Many of us in here are in panhandle areas, and we know what it's like to compete. And I don't think what we want to do is turn around and say, we're going to compete a little less in a certain area because we need a few pennies. And in the grand scheme of things, we're not talking about a lot of money here in the overall budget, but we're talking about a lot of money when it comes to the ability to compete, especially if you're in a panhandle, like I am and like the other delegate from the 3rd who eloquently spoke earlier. I'm not going to reminisce on everything she touched on. But the return on investment is clear, and to say that we don't bail out other industries is blasphemy. Last time I checked, this last session, we were debating whether we should steal property from individuals so we could help a company in the industry compete. Now, I'll talk about a subsidy. That is a subsidy. Thank you.
Gentleman from 30th, Delegate Bates.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the distinguished chairman yield?
Gentleman yield.
You're
Gentleman
getting
yield.
quite the workout today.
That's good.
Yes.
It's not over.
Mr. Chairman, could you speak to how this bill differs from the bill that passed out of this body during the regular session, House Bill 4271, that passed this chamber 62 to 37? What's the difference between this bill that we're debating today and the bill that this body previously acted on back on March 1st?
The difference is that bill was 90 days ago.
Okay,
Same
so this
thing.
is the same. This
Same
is the
thing.
same bill that we've been debating.
Yeah, two things. There were additional unexpended monies at that time, but the general intention of eliminating or doing away with the fund is the same. But in this bill, the monies are going into the rainy day fund as opposed to general revenue.
Okay. And would it be true to say that the bill that we passed out of this body back in March was in fact a governor's bill?
That is correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman from 35th, Delegate Byrd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My good friend, the finance chair, yield for a couple questions.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I wasn't here in 2011. I think you were. There's been my good friend from the 3rd brought up a good point. I mean, was the intent behind this to assist with the competitiveness of this industry for one of the biggest revenue producers in this state?
I believe that was the general intent.
And would you agree with me that that competition has gotten even worse as we sit here today?
I'm assuming there's a lot of competition for all industries these days.
Yeah, as some of the panhandle people pointed out earlier, you'd agree with me on that? Okay, and you would have no reason to disagree with me that you actually voted for this bill in 2011 as well as along a lot of your other colleagues?
Well, I guess if you're looking at an iPad, maybe you can tell me.
You did.
I did.
As well as a number of those people did as well.
And our financial situation was much different in 2011 than it is now.
And I understand that, but they are one of the biggest revenue producers in this state, correct?
They are a very big revenue
Thank you,
producer.
Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further members desiring to speak before I recognize gentleman from 35th. Delegate Lane, gentleman from 38th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, they are a very big revenue producer in the state. Very big revenue producer. And if you look at the digest of revenue for the state of West Virginia for FY15, which was just published in January, these tracks generated $508 million to the state coffers. Now, accepting that it's about a 50-50 split between the casinos and including the Greenbrier and the state of West Virginia, what that means for those of us who are looking at these numbers is that that industry had over $1 billion in slot machine casino revenue. $1 billion industry in the state of West Virginia. And this language, the modernization fund, provides for $9 million a year for them to upgrade their equipment. I think in a time when the budget is in crisis, West Virginia families are in crisis, West Virginia per capita income is declining, and if you track the revenues over the last few years, the last couple of years of the casinos in West Virginia, that casino revenue is on the increase, the incline. I think it is wholly reasonable for us as policymakers to say, you know, we've helped you out for a few years, but you're a billion-dollar industry per year, and we need that $9 million back because we rejected a tax the other day on poor working people, and now we want to make sure that the out-of-state corporations that generate billions of dollars in revenue are paying their fair share. And I would just follow up on my friend from the 30th's remarks. This passed the House in substantially the same form 90 days ago. I don't see anything that's changed other than we need that money more now probably than we did 90 days ago. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentlemen, 35th to close debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're in a difficult time right now, having to look at a lot of different areas. This industry, which we are a partner with, when you tax something at 50%, you're a partner. This particular credit has returned $50-some million over the 5 years. We don't necessarily have the same offering for other industries on a 2-for-1 or a 1-for-2 basis. And I do want to stress again, this particular bill has absolutely no effect on funding our senior programs, funding our Promise Scholarship programs. No effect. Has no effect on our racing industry right now. It's a balancing act that we're going through. We've got to fill a $270 million budget. We lost a measure the other day. You'll hear more about this afternoon. This is some funding alternatives. This fails. Then we cut. We look to cut other programs. So I put this before the body. This is a funding tool for us. Mr. Speaker, I urge passage.
Question for the House is the passage of the bill. Those in favor of passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, 64 ayes, 31 nays, 5 members absent not voting. Majority of members present having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Clerk, please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 105.
Are there amendments to the title? Now the title is read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. Lady from the 16th.
Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the bill take effect from its passage. I move that the bill take effect July 1st.
The lady from 16th moves that the bill take effect July 1st, 2016. All those in favor of the lady's motion will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, 71 ayes, 24 nays, 5 members absent not voting. 2/3 of the members elected having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill effective July 1st, 2016. Clerk, please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Request concurrence therein. Further bills on third reading.
House Bill 106.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from the 35th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With unanimous consent, I ask that this bill be returned to the Committee on Finance.
The gentleman from the 35th asks unanimous consent the bill be recommitted to the Committee on Finance. Is there objection? Chair hears none. The bill will be recommitted to the Committee on Finance. Lady from the 16th, Delegate Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Subject to announcements, I move that the House stand in recess until 3 p.m. today.
Are there announcements? If not, the question for the House is the motion by the lady from the 16th that the House stand in recess until 3 p.m. today. Gentleman from 35th, Delegate Nelson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. There is a strike and insert on the budget bill that is now in the system. Thank you.
Gentleman from 34th, Delegate Boggs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the distinguished Chair of Finance yield for a question, please?
Gentleman, yield.
Mr. Chairman, we're going to be taking up the amendments to the budget in short order, and we are trying to prepare, the minority is trying to prepare some amendments. Will we be able to access finance staff to assist in those, preparing those amendments?
We're in the process of preparing for our presentation this afternoon, but please let me know and we'll do our best, yes.
So we can contact you about some assistance?
Yes,
Thank
please
you.
do.
Gentleman from 36th, Delegate Rowe.
Yes, would the Chair of Finance yield?
Gentleman to yield. Gentleman yields.
Is there any document that we can look to compare, say, ideally a side-by-side or an abstract that would allow us to see what is in the budget for this year, what we propose for next year according to the committee substitute or strike and insert, whatever is being used? Do we have something that we can tell what we're cutting item by item?
At this time, I don't have that, but I do have a list of the individual cuts, and that will be provided.
And before the session this afternoon?
Yes, yes, and gosh, I don't know how to. As soon as we have that, I'll bring it here to the chamber and have it in the chamber.
Is it customary to have abstracts of the budget bill? I know we do, and there's a little button here, and I push, and it doesn't have any. There's no abstract. There's no discussion of what the budget bill is. Is that the usual procedure?
Gosh, I may yield to, not to my knowledge. I don't think that's.
No. Have we had side by sides in the past?
Not on the floor. No.
Okay. Thank you.
The gentleman, we would ask that if there is and to the chairman of finance, if you would provide any listings that you wish to distribute to members to the clerk's office, and then members can visit the clerk's office once those are available. So I would suggest you may want to stop by if you want to, or before we come back on the floor here, and see if those are available. Gentleman for the first, Douglas Tesla.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to get this out of the way as quickly as possible. On roll call 677, I have witnesses that I was in my seat and I did vote, and my vote was negative. It did not register.
I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about you. Sure. Okay. Gentleman's presence will be noted. Thank you. Lady from the 36th, Doug Guthrie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the finance chair yield, please?
Gentleman yield. Gentleman yields.
Thank you. Today, when we begin our discussion of the budget, will we have the list that we've been asking for since we even first started talking about the budget on where those directed transfers are going to and where they're coming from?
Yes, you will have that list.
When are we going to get that?
As soon as the staff has been extremely busy, and as soon as we can get that, that will be with the clerk. I'm committing to be as quick as we can on this.
Will we have that before we even discuss the amendments?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Gentleman from the 22nd, Doug Moffitt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the chairman yield?
Gentleman yield.
Mr. Chairman, has the Finance Committee gone over this in depth and spent days and days going over this and had documentation in front of them?
We've spent a lot of time in Finance Committee talking about the budget.
And the budget bill in the system now shows the changes that have been made?
It shows the net.
Proposed?
It shows the net dollar, yes.
Thank you for your hard work, and thank you,
Mr.
Speaker.
To the members, if I could clarify, it's been my experience and my recollection that the comparisons have been provided to the members when the bill was upon passage on third reading. That's what my recollection of those have been. I think that the Finance Committee has been trying to get comparisons prepared while they're also preparing the actual strike and insert amendment. You know, I know that they're trying to get them to the members as quickly as possible, but that's what my recollection that was done, has been provided. What summaries were provided of cuts have been done when the bill has been on third reading. We're going to try to get those today to the members when it's actually on second reading and on amendment stage. But that's been my recollection that those have been provided at the time the bill was on third reading. Gentleman from the 30th, Delegate Bates.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Chairman, is the strike insert that we'll be reviewing this afternoon fundamentally different than the strike insert that we spent 4 hours going over last week?
Thank you for the
line
question.
by line.
And I'm in general, what we reviewed in Finance Committee on Monday is completely intact. We incorporated a few of the across-the-board cuts that the Senate incorporated in their budget, or at least discussed over there. We've added only one new special revenue transfer. And in fact, we have restored a couple of the cuts from the budget that was presented in House Finance.
So if we looked at the document that we reviewed in finance, we haven't decided what we're going to call this thing, but potato.
We're going to get a new name for our committee. Compromise.
There we go. Committee of Compromise. The basic structure of the document, the basic approach, the philosophies that were looked at during that meeting when we went through it line by line is there, with some modifications or changes based upon the loss of the revenue measure and some information from the Senate. Would that be a true statement?
Yes, and so the general concept that the Finance Committee took in the bill was a couple of areas. We did an across-the-board cut. For instance, the constitutional officers, a 10% cut. Other areas, it was a 2%. And then there were some directed cuts. There were some sweeps of special reserve monies, as well as some reappropriated monies. And we lost a big revenue measure 2 days ago. And so we have made that difference up by going to rainy day.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Lady from 51st, Dr. Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A question, point of inquiry.
Lady, may proceed.
Thank you. Are we going to have hard copies of the budget on our desks, or are we going to be provided with them? I don't think I've ever voted on a budget when I didn't have a hard copy of it, because it's such a big document.
I know that in the past, and I believe that we have had hard copies on third reading of the budget, and I assume that those will be available. They will also be. I'll ask the gentleman from 35th to respond to that shortly. The chairman of the Committee on Finance, to just the way I said it, to respond. But I believe we will be getting hard copies, but they will also be on the system so that people can.
Right, but you'd almost have to spin to go through it in order to. I mean, when say the gentleman from Hardy was the finance chair, they would go through it, and it would be impossible to follow, because the page numbers are sometimes different than the hard copy than they are on the machine, and if you go by accounts, a lot of us who aren't on finance, we're not familiar with those accounts.
Okay. We will try to get hard copies of the budget when we go to third reading tomorrow.
Thank you.
Okay. Gentleman from the 35th.
We do have this on the system, and this is about efficiency, but we can get these hard copies, but I guess we'll drop a few more trees. But just one other comment that just to clarify, I mentioned some across-the-board cuts. I do want it to be very, very clear that this budget did not touch higher ed, did not touch the school aid funding formula, did not touch corrections. Those are three of our largest areas in the budget. Didn't touch. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
To the members, in conferring with the clerk, what I would suggest is that not everyone may want a hard copy, and rather than make 100 hard copies of the bill, because we normally don't make hard copies of any of our bills before the House, if you could today let the clerk know if you would like a hard copy of the bill, And we will make those available in the clerk's office prior to coming on the floor tomorrow, and you can pick those up. But please let the clerk know if you would like a hard copy, rather than just make hard copies for everyone who would rather follow it online. Gentleman from 34th, Doug Boggs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just briefly in response, it's my recollection that we in the past have attempted to supply information, whether it be in an abstract or whether it be in some supplemental document, to kind of outline for the members where specific cuts were made or where various changes were made. And I would submit, while I know that the staff in finance does a wonderful job and is working extremely hard, it's still very difficult at this point for even finance committee members that are there, because we've gone through and we've tried to mark up our hard copies the best we can. But with the strike and insert coming now this afternoon, and then trying to prepare amendments in 2 hours, and plus trying to work with finance staff if they're available, it's going to be a very difficult time frame to even know what's been cut and what hasn't been within that length of time. So I would certainly ask for a little bit of leeway, and anything that could be provided to the membership would certainly be helpful. Thank you.
John from the 16th, Doug Hornbuckle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent to be added as a co-sponsor to House Bill 114.
Take a hit on the bill, huh? You're crazy.
The gentleman from the 16th, under our rules, you can visit the clerk's office and fill out a form to be added, because the only time you would need to do that on the floor is if it's already been taken up on first reading. So it would be available to you to do that through the clerk's office.
Thank you.
Further announcements. Not question for the House is the gentleman from the 32nd, Delegate Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could we move the budget bill to third with right to amend? Since there's deference in time and time we'll have the bill to look at, would that be possible in terms of supplying copies and so forth?
We can give you a little more time. We'd rather not do it. I mean, you can make that motion, but I'd rather not have it on Thursday, right? I mean, go through all minutes tomorrow and go through those. We can go in a little bit later. If you'd like. I guess I have to. I've not been on finance, so I don't know. But I think we've gotten. I think as far as the membership, I never got anything until the day we voted on the budget. I never got any. Now, maybe members of finance were given that, but we were not.
My 16 years, we always had it presented a couple days ahead by Harold Martin. We always got a pie chart and so forth, and late over 24 hours before we took it out.
That was the final conference committee report, as I recall. That was done just now. Okay, why don't we have, get anything they've got as far as summaries, and we can go in a little later if you want a little more time tonight. We'll go probably 5 o'clock tonight. Okay, why don't we go in at 5 now? The only thing is, I don't want to, I think people want to be able to see the final product. I mean, I hate to take it to third, and then, I'd like for us to go through these amendments, get there tonight, and then everybody can take that and really see what the final product is before they go to. I don't know all of them. I mean, I've seen a number of them. Yeah. Why don't we just come in at 5, and mean, you can make that motion. I just prefer not to do it, to go through all those amendments tomorrow. I'd rather get through the amendments. I think if we do that, then we're kind of wasting, in my opinion, we're kind of wasting the day today, and then we've got, have lots of. Well, I think they'll give you what you've got. Where's Eric? But I don't know that they're going to have time to be creating a whole bunch of new documents. I mean, that's the only thing. If it's something that's existing and that they're looking at, then I don't have any problem you having that. I'm just saying, I don't think they're going to have time to, whether it's today or tomorrow, if they're trying to get the budget done and we want to vote on it tomorrow, I don't know how you're going to be able to create a bunch of comparisons of documents. But I think there will be. House will be in order. To the members, we are, I'm going to in a moment ask that the lady from 16th withdraw her motion to recess until 3, and we recess until 5 to give everyone a few more hours to be able to look at amendments and the draft amendments to the bill. We also, it's my understanding, I believe that the strike and insert is already on the system. Is that correct to the clerk? Strike and insert that would be offered, the committee strike and insert to the budget is already on the system, so individuals can review that. And I've also, we will, in addition to making staff available to members who may wish to draft amendments, the Finance Committee staff, we will provide attorneys from some of the other committees to assist, understanding that they may run those bills through the Finance Committee attorneys as well, but that will give them the opportunity to have some assistance in that regard. So the lady from the 16th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to withdraw my motion that we recess until 3, and I make a motion that we will come back at 5 p.m.
Lady from 16th asks consent to the motion to recess until 3 be withdrawn. Is there objection? Chair is none. The motion now before the House, subject to announcements, is that the House stand in recess until 5 p.m. Are there further announcements? Gentleman from the 4th, Doug Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker. For those people that may be hockey fans, my wife has been after me for a couple, 3 days now to mention the fact that our Wheeling Nailers are going to be in the Kelly Cup Finals. I think when they were the Thunderbirds back about 1993 or 94 made it. So that's kind of a big thing for the hockey team in the state, the only one we have. Also, the Nailers are the smallest team in the Pittsburgh Penguin franchise, and Pittsburgh needs one more win, and if they get that, they will also be in for the Stanley Cup. It's kind of an unusual thing to have 2 of the 3 teams going for the trophy. So just want to mention that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further announcements. Not question for the House is a motion by the lady from the 16th of the House stand in recess until 5 p.m. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. Ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Declare the House in recess until 5 p.m.